Hello, everyone. We are live here on Let's Talk Stuff podcast. And before we start, I'd like to give a little disclaimer. As some of you know, we changed our name from No Vision Internet Radio to the Let's Talk Stuff, so we could carry more things that are important to El Paso. And as you know, when we had candidates on the show, I would always say a disclaimer, which I'm going to do here. So here, Let's Talk Stuff, we do not endorse or we do not, in other words, we try to give you the aspect of thinking for yourself. We give you the information, you interpret it how you want. If you don't like the idea or you like what we're talking about, you're more welcome to always come on board. And I've always said that in the past. So as we're doing that, like I said, this is for you to understand the topic and for you to understand what is going on regarding the UMC proposed certificate of obligation. And yes, I have reached out to UMC to have someone on board. I haven't heard nothing. So don't think that I'm trying to be that just one-sided. As you know, I always try to give both sides their opportunity. So with that being said, so we're going to go and do this. We're going to go ahead and let's talk stuff. Thank you for tuning in to Let's Talk Stuff podcast. Today we have an interesting discussion, and thank you so much for the two guests or co-hosts and the guests. The co-host is Mr. Andrew J. Polk from Talk El Paso, KTSM 690 AM, which is one of my favorite shows, by the way. And of course, Ms. Karla Sierra from the LIBRE Initiative. So we're going to go ladies first, Mr. Polk, okay? Ms. Sierra, can you go ahead and tell everybody a little bit about yourself, ma'am?
Of course. Hi. So my name is Karla Sierra. I'm the director for the LIBRE Initiative here in El Paso. We've been here since 2016, born and raised here in El Paso. Lived in Colorado for a little while as I was doing my undergrad and working for a newspaper. And then actually served in the Peace Corps for 3 years in Panama. And then came back to El Paso and have been with LIBRE ever since 2016.
Oh, you were in the Peace Corps. Cool. Would you go anywhere in the Peace Corps?
I was in Panama.
Panama. Oh, okay.
Yes.
I've been to Panama Street. Not really. Oh. Right. And you, Mr. Polk, how you doing, sir?
Doing well. Thanks very much for inviting me to be along with us today.
Thank you, sir. I do appreciate it. So we're going to do, folks, we're going to give Ms. Sierra the opportunity to tell you what the initiative is in regards to UMC. So I do want to say this, as you know, who are watching, I'm big on disability rights advocacy. So I see this as a different perspective than normally. What I mean by that, one, being a property owner, me and my wife, owning our home. So we understand the dilemma of paying taxes, high taxes. Mm-hmm. And where we see our fellow brothers and sisters with disabilities literally being priced out of their home. What I mean by that is sometimes they have to go to a nursing home just because they can't afford the mortgage or the rent or whatever it is. They just have to decide between their medicine and their mortgage. And then I could see the other side regarding the gap in medical services here in El Paso. So I have a different perspective than normal, but I'll go ahead and let you start, Ms. Sierra.
Sure. So, the LIBRE Initiative, we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization, and our goal is to really encourage our communities to engage in different issues, whether it's local, state, or federal. And so obviously, we've been here since 2016. I don't come from a political background, and we really have not engaged in any political issues here at all since I've been the director. Obviously, certificates of obligation and property taxes are something that affect every El Pasoan, no matter whether you're a D, an R, or an I. So, it's something that really is affecting a lot of people. We are, third in the state of Texas in terms of the amount of property taxes that we pay. I think now we're fourth in the country, highest property taxes that we pay. The reason that we wanted to inform our community about this issue with UMC, which, certificates of obligation, it's debt without voter approval, is that initially when they started the process, they were very there was a lack of transparency, right? So they were trying to pass this essentially without letting the community know. And two, I mean, it is a lot of money. At the end of the day, they're wanting $400 million, but after inflation and interest rates, it's probably going to be closer to $563 million. So, that was something that we felt was important for the El Paso community to have the opportunity to vote on something like this, especially since our property taxes are already pretty high. And that's where we're coming from. We're not making any money off of these efforts. We are using our own resources to send out postcards. We have a billboard off of I-10. We're door knocking. We're having community meetings and things like that. And it really, really is an opportunity for us to encourage the El Paso community to get involved, but more importantly, to let us vote on this really important issue.
Well, do you have a question, Mr. Pogue, before I go?
So there's a lot of interesting points being made with this, and I mean, I think that one of the more key ones here is that there's a few petitions going out there, but the major point that you all are focusing on is to put this on to the ballot is essentially the major focus at this point in time, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right. So, in full transparency, LIBRE, we do believe in, not and we don't believe in high taxes. I mean, we do believe that there are other options besides always putting the tax burden on taxpayers. And for us, we have come out and been open about the fact that we do oppose this. I mean, this is a lot of money for folks in El Paso. We still have one of the poorest zip codes in the country. So this would affect a lot of people. And for us, we have been transparent saying that we do oppose this. However, our efforts and the petition drive only ensures that we could get it on the ballot in November. If El Pasoans want to come out and they feel that all these 5 projects are necessary for our community, then at least we have the opportunity to come out and vote in November. So, this doesn't mean whether we collect all the 25,000 signatures, it doesn't mean that this project is going to fail. It just means that we can actually put it on the ballot in November.
Do you think that what's happening, because there's so much, talk or chatter on social media regarding this initiative and the other group, do you think it has to do from the stench of the city, of all the things they've done with the CODs, certificates of obligation? Do you think that that's why we're having all these discussions? Because it's amazing, Ms. Sierra, that when I first heard about this, I'm like, okay, put it on the ballot. But then all of a sudden you started seeing all this political stuff. Like, oh, they're not being, it's not nonpartisan, and you mentioned the Koch brothers. And I'm like, okay. So what can you say to those people that go that route and start bringing up other issues rather than to really focus, in my opinion, 2 things. The increase in taxes, granted UMC or the health district gets a small portion of the 29% after the school districts, but still it impacts you at the end of the day if you're a property owner, or even if you rent. If you rent properties, folks, I hope you know that if the owner gets an increase, you're going to get an increase in rent. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like I said earlier, there's a gap in services when it comes to healthcare. So what can you say to those people that want to split hairs and start talk about the political stuff aspect of this?
Yeah, I completely understand that. Like I said, we really have not engaged in any policy issues here in El Paso since we've been here. My primary focus has been teaching financial literacy. We've done ESL classes, things of that nature. We haven't really engaged in anything political. I understand the concern about, Mr. Charles and David Koch. David passed away a few years ago. And so in 2011, our president and founder, Daniel Garza, he was working at the White House, and Mr. Koch, both of them actually approached him and said, hey, we really would like to provide some funding for you to start an organization. And Daniel comes from a migrant farm worker family who migrated from Mexico. And so he really wanted to provide opportunities and resources for the Hispanic community. And so that's really what we've been doing since 2011. We are actually in Texas fully funded by donors in Texas. So, we are fully self-sufficient. We're in 11 other states. And yes, we are still part of the Stand Together Foundation, which is, they have hundreds and hundreds of other nonprofits that are also under that umbrella. They help, anywhere from Hispanics to veterans to active military to, folks with disabilities or homeless. I mean, there are a lot of nonprofits that are doing a lot of great work under that umbrella. And so I can understand with our political demographic here in El Paso how that could be a concern for people. But I think what we are doing has nothing to do with anything political or partisan. Like I mentioned, property taxes affect everybody. So, I mean, it doesn't matter, what political spectrum you're on. I mean, this is certainly something that affects everybody in El Paso. And, this is a county issue as well. So it's going to be affecting those folks that are in Clint and Socorro and Fabens. I mean, those folks are also going to be affected by this tax. And so I understand the concern. Like I mentioned earlier, I am from here, born and raised. And so, I care about my community and I want to make sure that they're informed. And yes, we do oppose this, but mostly because of how the projects came about, how there wasn't any transparency. And they should have really confided in the community and brought this to the table and talked to us about what their intentions were. And that didn't happen in the beginning. So, to be honest, as we've been out there the last month or so talking to folks about it, we've gotten probably like 80 to 85% support about what we're doing and not really anything about, well, what political party are you from? Who funds you? We have heard very little of that. It's mostly been like, we really appreciate you. It's about time that somebody's helping us with this problem in El Paso, which I think is great. I mean, I think it's great that El Pasoans, they're really concerned about what's happening with the property taxes, especially with certificates of obligation. UMC already has 242 million certificates of obligation outstanding. And the only reason that we're actually able to do this petition drive this time is because of the law that was just recently passed. So, from now, since before this law was passed, I mean, they could essentially pass as many COs as they wanted to. But now, we have this checks and balances that we can actually implement anywhere across Texas, which I think is going to be, great for our communities, I think.
Mr. Pope?
So it's very interesting that you mentioned that. Of course, there have been previous, funding efforts, and I did a lot of reporting on what was going on, particularly with the El Paso Children's Hospital, separate from this here. But there's been a lot of very important things that have been going on when it comes to the county hospital district, and even just the building we're talking about there, the major part that inhabited both the side towers, UMC and El Paso Children's. But some of those previous projects is a very interesting number along with it, and kind of leads to the larger conception I've been hearing from people about taxes and the issue with it. Now, I was kind of a similar thing. Not born but raised here, went out of town, came back, but I do recall back in 2014 there was at least one candidate that if only because their sign stuck around there on the approach on I-10 towards downtown, I believe it was Aliana Apodaca, and she was challenging at that point in time County Judge Veronica Escobar in the Democratic primary, and the sign was "Enough with high taxes." That's what kind of sticks with me, and that sign stood there for a while, for at least another couple of years, kind of weathering down there. But the reason that I'm bringing all of this up is to say that the conception of taxes, there have been, incrementally people making this point about high taxes and the cost of it, but up until kind of this moment, there had been this, sure, no one is like, yay taxes, but a lot of people, the way our elected bodies were going was very much towards, we are seeing these incremental movements. Much discussion happening with city council in a separate way with their setting of taxes today, but the increased costs, etc. So when it comes to then delving into this issue and seeing this concern over it, how do you all even begin to approach the concept of taxes and addressing it with people? Because sure, again, you're going to be hard pressed to find just about anyone saying, yes, I would like to pay more in taxes, but the willingness to actually do something about it has been pretty low in this community, it seems to me, at least previously.
Yeah, I agree. I think there has been, unfortunately, a mindset of complacency, but also, a little bit of helplessness because, we can knock on people's doors and talk to them, or they'll come to our office and, they'll kind of say, what's the point? What's the point of us gathering all these signatures, or what's the point of your efforts if nothing's going to change? But, I don't believe that. Like, I believe that our efforts are really being noticed, from folks that have never been engaged to, folks that, they didn't know really what COs were, or they didn't know that we are taxed by 5 different entities, and that's concerning to me. Property taxes, I mean, it's a huge deal. I mean, it's very expensive. They're very expensive. And a lot of folks didn't even know that we were actually taxed by 5 different entities. Why are we paying for community college? Why are we paying for UMC? Things like that. And unfortunately, those are kind of out of my scope, right? In all humility, like, I don't have all the answers, but I want them to know, like, listen, like, certificates of obligation, that's a huge loophole that our legislators can use to put more tax burden on us. Let's do something about it. Now we have this law that we can actually do a petition drive and kind of hold them accountable. So these are the options, right? Also looking back at, like, the history of UMC, the Children's Hospital filed bankruptcy in 2015. They still have not paid $42 million of that, those funds, right? So they have been in some financial strain for quite some time. And so, these are things that people may not be aware of, and that we can actually shed some light on that. We're not saying that we don't want healthcare for our community. We don't want healthcare for people that can't afford it. We're just saying, at least be transparent with us and let us decide on this expenditure, because it is a lot of money, whether it's 2%, whether it's 22%. And I know that they've been kind of hammering us on that too. We've been transparent and showing how we came about the 22%, which the 22% is only the UMC portion. So their portion of what they're already taxing us, they want an increase of 22%. And so, honestly, that's the last thing that people talk about when they come to sign the petition. They're mostly talking about, this is enough. Like, our taxes are going up every year. I'm getting taxed on my home. I'm on Social Security. I'm on a fixed income. I mean, those are really the things that people are talking about. I think they're really excited about this. I mean, I think it's been a positive momentum, and folks are, taking petitions with them, and they're also going back home and educating their neighbors and their friends and their family. And so, I mean, I think this really has a positive, kind of shift in the complacency that I've seen El Paso be in. So, I mean, I think that's great. At the end of the day, like I've said before, win or lose, at least we were able to inform our community a little bit about what this is, and what we can do in the future if this does come about again.
And Mr. Sierra, I do apologize. I'm putting comments on the feeds. I'm not sure you're seeing that. There's some comments I'm putting while you're talking. So they're basically saying sign the petition. But
Okay.
So let me ask you this. I got some questions prior to this broadcast. There's 2 questions. And let me go ahead and do this real fast, Mr. Polk.
Absolutely.
So first one is, I do apologize. For those who don't know, I am visually impaired, so I'm having it read in my ear, so my screen reader. So sometimes it's kind of slow. One of the questions is, do any of the leadership, the LIBRE Initiative leadership, hold our own property here in El Paso?
LIBRE leadership, like part of our team?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So I'm a homeowner here.
Okay. And
yes.
then the second question is, I'm sorry.
I do have some part-time staff who are also homeowners here in El Paso.
Okay. And then the second question is, and actually you touched on this, the 22%. Is that truly what it is right now, or is that down the road from the 22%? Is that like a collective 22%, or is that today 22%?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And I mean, I always preface this like I'm terrible at math, so bear with me. But essentially on June 27th, during a commissioners meeting, UMC proposed an increase of 5.68 cents. So the rate that they were already at, which right now they're at like 0.25 and a bunch of other numbers, they wanted to increase that 0.25 by 5.68 cents. So when you kind of take the difference of both of those numbers, that's where we got the 22% increase from. So that's showing that they would like to increase their current rate by 22%. So that's where we got our 22%. I know that they're now saying 2% on their side, and that's essentially including all of the other taxing entities that currently tax us. And we're just focusing on the UMC portion. So
Okay.
I know that that can be a little bit confusing, but that's where we got the 22% from.
Okay. Mr. Polk?
Yeah, and that is, I think, a very particular point, and one of the tenets of debate that has essentially been coming up in this issue. So, spoke earlier today on our program with the Republican Liberty Caucus of El Paso, another organization that is very interested in the organizing and the generation of this petition and getting people to sign it there. And one of the finer points they came up with is that, yes, that 20 some odd percent, that the way that's being calculated is of the increase of essentially there's two ways to think about it. You can think about each individual taxing agencies, the way they are changing, and that's where that 20% number comes from, and versus the kind of way it's being talked about otherwise that you mentioned there, that single digit percent anyway, is about of the overall tax bill that an average homeowner in El Paso will be expected to do here. I've often had issues with the way we even talk about the way taxes are talked about, because as much as that's put forth, oh yeah, it'll be this much for a $100,000 home, oftentimes $100,000 homes are not the median home cost here, so it doesn't end up being the actual average cost for people. So that's one thing we keep in mind when we do this here, but just make it clear that's the kind of way you're talking about it, as well as you're talking about a percentage increase in that specific segment, essentially, if you want to think of the whole thing as a pie, of that slice of the pie that does come for the county hospital district, aka UMC.
Exactly. And I mean, and we've been, transparent and forward with that as well. I mean, we're not going to negate their 2%. And to be honest, I don't know where they got the 2% from. So I know that there was an article on KTSM and some other places where, they mentioned it was some kind of trade secret and they couldn't really divulge where they got that percentage from. But yes, we have been completely transparent with our folks saying, look, this is where we got it from. And yes, we're going to be upfront about it. The other thing that we've also mentioned to folks is that our appraisals have gone up every single year, probably for the last 10 years. So, if you're going out and saying that it's going to cost you X amount of dollars for a home that's $100,000, that's also being a little bit disingenuous, because that's probably going to change next year when our appraisals go up again. And then the average home in El Paso is actually closer to $200,000. So we had a panel, last week with the president of the Builders Association, and he said, the average homes now in El Paso, they're about $200,000. So, you're not looking at paying whatever $85 or whatever a year they're saying. I mean, that number is most likely going to increase. So, that's kind of what we've also been telling folks.
That's kind of what happened today. Was the city council approved the new fiscal budget with a little asterisk saying that they're going to go at a lower property rate. But in essence, you talked about this today on your show, Mr. Buck. I could be wrong, but I think the thing is we want to make sure we're saying the right thing when we say that, because in that sense, that's not true, because like how you just said, the value of your home has just gone up. So what does that mean? Your taxes go up. So when the city council said, well, we're doing this, we want to make sure we're clear on that when it comes to the actual numbers, because at the end of the day, you're going to be paying more next year, folks. Just want you to know that.
Exactly.
If someone wants to sign the petition, Ms. Sierra, how can they do this? Is this a physical paper, or is it electronically, or how?
Yes, great question. So unfortunately, they do not accept electronic signatures. So it does have to be pen to paper. They do need the original copy. They can come to our office. So 1155 Westmoreland, Suite 212. So, usually someone's here at the office Monday through Friday. People are coming in to sign. If we're not here for whatever reason, we also have some petitions on our door, and people can sign it and just drop it through our mail slot that's right by our door. People can also email us, and I'm happy to email the PDF copy. They can mail it back to our office if they're just, kind of far away. That's not a problem. We've also mailed some out because we've also got some folks that are, disabled and they're just, they don't drive anymore. So we've been able to mail some out as well. So, we've been trying to get them out to people as easily as possible so that they can sign the petition.
You touched on something real interesting, Ms. Sierra. How about someone in my position that can't see? How could we sign it legally?
So great question. I mean, we can get one to you, and so we have had someone that their husband was same situation, and she had power of attorney. So she was able to sign it for the husband and just put on there that she signed it because of this. So that we did have an example that like that as well. And essentially, the only part that has to be signed by the actual person is their signature, and then the rest of the information, like printed name, date of birth, another person can actually fill those blanks in.
Okay.
So that's also been a little bit helpful for us.
Okay, Mr. Polk.
So a question about then you mentioning about how they can sign it and get it back to you all here. I'm aware of at least, I'm going to call it probably a better part of 3 different organizations that are working on this yourselves, the Republican Liberty Caucus of El Paso, as I mentioned there, and at least one special purpose PAC involved with this. So if anyone's confused out here, I actually found myself confused at one point, wondering if there were technically multiple different petitions going on. To clarify, there is just one petition, right?
That's correct. There's one petition. It has the same language. I think the other one that I've seen, it has their instructions are a little bit different than like the LIBRE instructions, but essentially the meat of the petition is the same. So as long as it's for the same purpose, then the county clerk will need to consolidate everything when we submit everything on September 9th.
And so, again, that date is very important here. Just quick follow-up here, George, if you don't mind, because we were talking about that one all under that provision of the Texas Local Government Code that, again, allows for certificate of obligation used to be put onto the ballot. So that kind of ends up going to be the question, then what happens towards the end of this process? I know that the initial filing from UMC does have that it'll be at the September 12th meeting of the County Commissioners Court that will then be when the decision is made by county commissioners on how to deal with this, because they've not technically issued the debt yet. They have given kind of preliminary sort of that timeline and that countdown that we've been on. So when it comes to all of these different efforts that have been going on with this, or any individuals that have been doing it even on their own, but of the same petition, as you mentioned, how will those then be reconciled and work together? And is it all, again, that September 9th timeline that you're looking at being the kind of critical moment?
Yes. So we're telling all of our folks September 9th. Technically, we have until, the meeting on the 12th. Myself definitely do not want to turn all those signatures in on that day. But we will, our goal is to get them in on the 9th. We are still, if we haven't met our goal by the 9th, we're still going to have Saturday and Sunday, a couple of days to still door knock and collect, a few more signatures as we can. And we can submit those on the 12th. But, I definitely don't want to dump, thousands of signatures on the county clerk on September 12th. So our group is going to go ahead and submit them on the 9th.
And one of the questions I've had, or I have, is I guess someone's confused. If you're not a registered voter, can you sign the petition?
That's a very great question. And hopefully this is something that we can correct during next session, because there have been, going through this process, I have learned a lot of things that could probably be corrected. So one thing is that, so you have to be a registered voter to sign the petition. However, I have, come across a lot of property owners that are not registered to vote, but they still pay property taxes. So, I've been telling them, if you have someone in your home that's 18 and registered to vote, let them sign the petition, because that's one more signature that we didn't have. But unfortunately, if they do own a home and they're property owners paying property taxes and not registered, they cannot sign the petition. So, I mean, there are, things like that we might want to correct in the future.
Mr. Pope?
So if it essentially wasn't for that, again, that Texas local government code provision that came in I believe, 2019 after that legislative session, and essentially what will happen then after this petition goes forward, what would the focus of all efforts been on this issue? I mean, I know that there isn't too much remedy except for essentially direct petitioning at that point here. So just kind of perspective on what you would have done otherwise. And also then, what happens after, assuming the petition were to be successful and getting that, I believe it's the 5% of registered voters of the affected area of the county then that is required to be done for this. Is that right?
Exactly. It's 5% of registered voters. Yeah. So I mean, our goal is to continue our efforts in, whether it's COs and kind of informing our community on what we can do about this, because this process, we're only the third community or third city in Texas that has actually tried to, complete this process. The other I know was Kerrville, and they only needed less than 700 signatures. And I said, that must have been nice. But, because of our how many people we have registered to vote, I mean, obviously we have a higher number. But again, I mean, this process can be done with, the county, the city. If they attempt to pass COs, we can certainly do this process again and kind of rally the community together around this. So it really is going to allow us a checks and balances and an opportunity to hold our elected officials accountable, because that just really hasn't been the case before. And when certificates of obligation came about in the 70s, they were supposed to be used for, kind of like an emergency as needed basis. And now a lot of municipalities are using it for kind of like a blank check. They're just saying, hey, we want a statue, or we want a water park, or we want, this and that. And, that's just kind of frivolous spending, unfortunately. So we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to kind of hold them accountable and let them know that we're paying attention. So LIBRE will continue to engage in local efforts as well, and kind of help our community rally together around those issues.
So we have like 5 minutes left over. So I want to ask, I guess, my final question, and Mr. Polk. So at the end of the day, I want to make a comment too, just kind of ironic. If this happens, if it goes to the ballot and El Paso doesn't show up to vote like they normally do, that's going to be kind of ironic, don't you think, Mr. Polk? Because historically, El Paso has been very bad with a voter coming out to vote. But I guess my last question is, where can someone look? Is there like a website specifically for this initiative, Ms. Sierra? Can they go and see the details of what we just talked about?
Yeah, great question. So we've actually been doing a lot of, digital media and interviews, panels that we've had. We had an interview with Councilwoman Rodriguez last week, who kind of talked through COs and things like that. So, you can go to @LibreTexas, and that would be on our Facebook page. We have interviews with community members, the presidents of the builders, realtors, and apartment association have also come out in support of our efforts. So, a lot of people can go on there and watch some of the things that we've been doing around the community. Also, if they'd like to email us directly, we do have an email account set up for this, and it's eplibreumc@blibre.org. So, we're happy to connect with anybody if they have any additional questions or concerns or anything like that. Myself and my team, we're ready to, jump on the phone or, meet with anyone that has additional concerns about this.
Mr. Polk?
I'm just very curious about how, even this came about. You mentioned that you haven't been too politically involved, and getting involved in this, we kind of go over a little bit, but the decision to then step into an inherently political process here. And then the kind of other technical question that I've really had is then, is there expectation of what ballot this will end up on? I know that from the city's side of things that they've put a bunch of ballot initiatives / petition drives in different issues than this, certainly, to that next May ballot. Is there an expectation of, if this were to be successful, where it would then actually be available for the voters to actually make their decision on?
So our goal is for it to be on the November ballot. And the reason for that is because all of our signatures, they'll actually expire in 6 months. So, if they're, they would have to get it on a ballot before that 6-month period is over, because then they would basically be invalid, unfortunately. So that really is our goal in all this. And I'm not really sure how what's going to happen, because, like I said, this is very new, not only to Texas, but also to El Paso. So I think it has been kind of a learning process on getting this done. But yes, unfortunately, that is really our goal because of the signatures and when they would expire.
Okay. And I guess, did you ever expect any further efforts like this to kind of come out of this? It's just a similar kind of vein or anything like it?
Yeah, I think our efforts will continue with COs. I know, and again, like our goal, we didn't start this because we were trying to attack UMC or attack healthcare for folks that couldn't afford it. I mean, our reason for jumping on this was really the lack of transparency and how the process started. And so, but however, with that being said, I mean, we have been able to learn how we can use this tool to make sure that COs are not used improperly, right? Because they have been used improperly to pay for things that we may not need here in the community. And so we definitely want to continue to engage on that. If there's another issue that comes about that El Pasoans are kind of fired up about and they want us to help them engage, I mean, we're happy to do that. We've done so on immigration, on education, on criminal justice reform, a lot of different policy issues that affect our community. So, I mean, we're happy to help our community and, engage in any of those policy issues that are important to them.
And I'm going to say this before we go. Going back to my comment made earlier, for those who are really watching, and it's going to be you could watch it again. But the thing is for those people like me who are in the middle, when I say that, is number one, I'm employed, but many of my friends that have disabilities are not. So they live on social services like food stamps, Social Security, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you have a homeowner that lives off of SSI, which is $770, folks, just so you can know. So they say a couple. So they say that's close to $1,500 a month. Then you have the high property taxes. Okay? So what happens? This person, like I mentioned before, they have to decide what to do with their money. It's so limited. Okay? And then at the same time, you have the concern about your taxes. And then on the other end, you have the concern about the lack of health care here in El Paso. Because I don't know if you know Ms. Sierra or those who are watching, Mr. Pogue, in El Paso, the simplest things you think would be accessible are not. Like, you have a perfect example. In 2019 or 2018, New Hampshire University did a study, and they looked at 350 cities throughout the United States, metropolitan cities, and compared it to, when it comes to people with disabilities, transportation, education, economy, and healthcare. El Paso ranked 146 out of that list. So what I mean is you're split. So that's why we want to give you the information, folks, for you to make that decision, to you go out there and vote, and if it goes to the ballot, to vote. And not only that, Ms. Sierra, like you said, question when there's no transparency in the discussion. The city is well known for that. Unfortunately, as you know, Mr. Polk, on my postings, the city will say one thing and do another. And that's where Ms. Sierra is talking about the transparency not being there. For example, we're going to do this, but then when it comes to the vote or someone gets I'll give you an example. Folks. We've had many politicians on this show, many of them, from mayors to Ms. Escobar to you name it. They say something here, they get elected, I hear crickets. Okay? And one of them running for city council right now, and I'm not going to say who it is. You know who you are. You say something on this show, we get elected, crickets. And that's what Ms. Sierra is focusing on, is the transparency. And we need to look at that. Yes, there's politics. There's going to be politics in everything, folks. Right, Mr. Polk? I mean, you name it. You say a word, politics. You can say puppy food, politics. I'm being facetious here. But what I'm saying is we need to focus on what Ms. Sierra and the initiative, not only her initiative, but the other initiative. We want transparency when it comes to our money. Okay? If I'm going to invest into our home by paying taxes, I want the investment there. Not on what the city does and what other entities do, like school boards. Like, for example, when the school board passed that 650 bond, several years ago. So we want our voices heard, Ms. Sierra. Okay? But at the same time, we also need those services for healthcare. Okay? The UMC is one of those essentials because it's free services for those who are low income. Unfortunately, which is what? Low income, people with disabilities, and the elderly are the most demographics for those. But parting words before we go, Mr. Polk. Oh, no, ladies first. Ms. Sierra first. Your parting comments.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I mean, we really do want to be transparent in everything that we're doing. And, at the end of the day, we want to make sure that we are holding the best interests of our community, at the forefront. And if there's something that we can do better, I mean, let us know. If there's, something that's confusing about our messaging, we want to make sure that we correct that. But, we want to be transparent, and we want to make sure that everyone understands why we're doing what we're doing. And, come and sign the petition, come to our office and learn more about our efforts. And we're happy to talk with you and connect with you any way that we can. So again, thank you for the opportunity. We really do appreciate it.
Of course, Ms. Sierra, you're always welcome. Anybody out there that wants to talk about their issues, and like I said, information is crucial. It's how you interpret it. Because I could say one word, Mr. Polk could say one word, like I was saying earlier, and people will flip it. It's just amazing. Anyways, Mr. Polk.
Well, thanks for the opportunity for having me on here, George. I do appreciate it, because talking about this is very important, and hope to share more of this perspective on our coming shows as well here. Ms. Sierra, thank you very much for speaking with us about this and the many different parts of it. It'll be very interesting to see y'all's efforts and what y'all are working on in the future there.
Shout out to your show, Mr. Promote it. Go ahead and promote it. I'm sorry.
Okay, I host Talk El Paso, airing 4 to 6 p.m. every Monday through Friday on News Radio 690 KTSM. And that's where we talk about the issues here. And this has definitely been generating a lot of interest from our audience and from others. I've had people I've worked with on buying houses in the past sending me this saying, hey, have you heard of this? And in my case, the answer is yes, but a lot of people have not necessarily yet. So the amount of interest that I've had expressed to me from kind of either side of this and around this issue has been significant. So again, appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today about it.
Wait a minute, you didn't mention my favorite show, the El Paso History Show. Mr. Polk, seriously.
Okay.
You know what? I'm going to knock you off this broadcast. Not really. The El Paso History Show. Come on, Mr. Polk. That's my favorite show.
If we're getting in depth there, yes. I also host the El Paso History Radio Show, which airs Saturdays 10 to noon on the same station, 690 AM. And, of course, the El Paso Public Forum, which airs Sundays on all of our local iHeartRadio stations.
A little side note on that, Mr. Polk. I've been a fan of that since Leon Metz, your dad, Melissa Sargent. I've been years. I'm a history buff. But anyways, and for me, my parting words is, first of all, Ms. Sierra, thank you for coming on board, giving us information regarding the initiative that's being done. And I'd like to thank Mr. Polk. This is the second time you've been on my show. I appreciate it. You coming and giving your knowledge. Like I told you before the broadcast, I think you have that finger on the pulse of discussions, what's going on, which is important to El Paso. And me, I'd like to thank Abel Rodriguez, because he's the one that actually told me about your initiative, Miss Sierra. He's one of my mentors. He tells me, hey, why don't you check this out, because it affects people, especially people with disabilities. I'm like, we should talk about this. Because some people don't want to talk about it because they're like, I don't really want to say that word, or healthcare and taxes, but we need to talk about that, because at the end of the day, we're going to pay those taxes. Either way, if it passes through the bond or if it passes through the COD, the certificate of obligation, that we need to really start questioning our government when it comes to transparency, and not just say, oh, okay, está bien, well, here we go, we're done. No, this is why we're at. This is how you said, Ms. Sierra, and Mr. Polk, you said this on your show. El Paso folks, I don't know if we're behind or we're surpassed Detroit, Michigan in regard to tax per capita when it comes to a metroplex or a metropolitan. Detroit City folks, I don't know if you know this, but Detroit filed for bankruptcy. Are we going that way too? I don't know, but that's the thing to think about, folks. You got to be, thinking about that. One thing I do want to mention, I don't think I mentioned this at the beginning. If I do, forgive myself for repeating myself. We are going to host, or we're going to be part of a town hall meeting with Art Prieto. It's going to be September the 13th. I'm going to be one of the speakers. We're going to be talking about Sun Metro's paratransit. Talk about transparency. I'm not going to go there. Anyways, September the 13th from 6 to 8. Going to be at EPCC Administration Building A from 6 to 8. I'll be posting that. I'll probably try to do a podcast live from there. It's going to be September the 13th town hall meeting with Art Prieto. He's a state representative. And so, Ms. Sierra, thank you, ma'am, for what you're doing to help us know more of what's going on. Mr. Polk, thank you, sir. And everyone, good night. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much,
Bye-bye.
George.